I should have known something was wrong the moment Marcus waltzed into the quarterly review meeting wearing his signature smirk. That smugness was the appetizer. My very public termination for quiet quitting was the main course. Little did he know I'd been planning the dessert for months. I owned the trademark to Horizon Pulse, the very name that adorned his precious company's letterhead. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It was a Thursday afternoon, the kind where the air conditioning works too well and everyone's wearing cardigans in July. Our office occupied the 32nd floor of a glass monstrosity downtown, all chrome and swagger and million-dollar views. That Marcus reminded us daily we were privileged to enjoy on his dime. The quarterly review meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m., but Marcus always arrived 15 minutes late, a power move he'd probably read about in some airport business book with a title like Dominate or Disappear. I'd been with Horizon Pulse for 4 years as their lead trademark specialist and brand strategist. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days protecting other people's intellectual property while quietly securing the most valuable piece of all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The conference room filled with the usual suspects, department heads nervously shuffling papers, marketing directors rehearsing their metrics under their breath, and a handful of board members who'd flown in for the occasion. I sat in my usual spot, third chair from the left, laptop open, notes meticulously organized. Sophia from HR shot me a strange look when I walked in, a mix of pity and anxiety that should have been my first warning. Marcus burst through the door at 3:17 p.m. exactly, trailing his executive assistant and the faint scent of expensive cologne. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Let's cut to the chase, people. Numbers are down, market share is slipping, and I'm looking for answers, not excuses. His voice had that manufactured gravel that men in power seem to cultivate after their first million. The presentations began, each department head rising to defend their quarterly performance while Marcus scrolled through his phone, occasionally looking up to inject a cutting remark or dismissive grunt. The tension in the room was thick enough to slice and serve with the stale conference room cookies no one was brave enough to touch. When the last slide from the last presentation faded to black, Marcus stood up, buttoning his tailored jacket with manicured fingers. Thank you all for your contributions. The pause was deliberate, dripping with condescension. Now, before we wrap up, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. His eyes locked on me, cold and calculating. Or rather, the quiet quitter among us. The room went silent. 20 pairs of eyes swiveled in my direction. I felt my face flush, but kept my expression neutral, a skill I'd perfected over years of negotiating trademark disputes with hostile attorneys. Maya, would you care to explain to everyone why your productivity metrics have fallen 30% below target for the third consecutive month? Or why you've declined 3 dinner meetings with clients? Or perhaps why you've been leaving precisely at 5:30 every day while the rest of your team puts in the hours necessary for success? I opened my mouth to respond, but he waved his hand dismissively. Don't bother. We've been tracking your performance, your hours, your engagement scores. This company was built on hustle and dedication. We don't carry passengers at Horizon Pulse. He turned to address the room, playing to his audience. This is what happens when entitlement creeps into corporate culture. People think they can collect a paycheck without giving their all. They think work-life balance means doing the bare minimum. I think my performance metrics are being misrepresented, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The words hung in the air like an unexpected guest at a dinner party. Marcus's eyebrows shot up, unused to interruption. Excuse me? My billable hours are consistent with my contract. My client retention rate is 97%, the highest in the department. The trademark infringement cases I've handled this quarter have saved the company approximately $4 million. I kept my tone even, professional. If that's your definition of quiet quitting, perhaps your metrics need recalibration. The silence that followed was deafening. Someone, I think it was Dave from accounting, coughed awkwardly. Marcus's face darkened to a shade I'd previously only seen on overripe plums. Your contract, he finally said, his voice dangerously soft, is terminated, effective immediately. He smiled, a shark scenting blood. You seem to have forgotten that Horizon Pulse operates on excellence, not mediocrity hidden behind contractual technicalities. I didn't move, didn't blink, just kept my eyes locked on his as he continued his performance. Let this be a lesson to everyone in this room. Quiet quitting has consequences. Commitment isn't measured by hours alone, but by dedication to our mission. Maya has chosen to prioritize her personal life over company success, and that's her right. Just not on my payroll. He nodded to Sophia from HR, who looked like she wanted to dissolve into her chair. Security will escort you to collect your personal items. Your access has already been revoked, and a severance package, though you hardly deserve one, will be processed by the end of the week. The room remained frozen, a corporate tableau of shocked faces and averted gazes. I closed my laptop with a soft click, stood up, smoothed the invisible wrinkles from my skirt, and walked toward the door with as much dignity as I could muster. Not because I was broken, but because I knew something Marcus didn't. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Just as I reached the door, a voice cut through the silence. That was quite the spectacle. I turned to see a woman I hadn't noticed before, sitting in the corner of the room. She wore a crisp white suit that screamed old money and success, her silver hair cut in a precise bob that framed sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes. She wasn't looking at me, but at Marcus, with the clinical interest of a scientist observing a particularly disappointing experiment. "Excuse me?" Marcus said, clearly thrown by this unexpected interjection. The woman stood, buttoning her jacket with an unhurried elegance. I said, "That was quite the spectacle. I typically handle terminations in private, but perhaps that's just my outdated sense of professional courtesy." Her accent carried a hint of something European, Swiss, maybe, or Austrian. "And you are?" Marcus demanded, his authority visibly wavering. She smiled, a small, controlled thing that never reached her eyes, and walked over to me. From her pocket, she produced a business card and placed it directly into my hand. "Elise Reinhardt, CEO of Prism Interactive." She finally looked at me. Not through me. "We appreciate people like you, Maya. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Don't be late." I glanced down at the card, heavy cardstock with minimalist embossing. Prism Interactive, Marcus's biggest competitor, the company that had been steadily eating away at Horizon Pulse's market share for the past 18 months. Elise turned back to Marcus, whose face had lost several shades of color. "Fascinating company culture you've cultivated here. Very 20th century." With that, she nodded politely to the room and walked out, leaving a vacuum of silence in her wake. Marcus's voice broke through, high and strained. "Security, escort Miss Sharma out. Now." I didn't resist as the security guard, Jim, who'd always been kind enough to save me a parking spot on rainy days, awkwardly led me to my desk. I collected my plants, my framed law degree, and a few personal items, acutely aware of the whispers and stares from colleagues who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. The contents of 4 years fit into a single cardboard box. Pathetic, really. "I'm sorry about this, Maya," Jim mumbled as we waited for the elevator. "It's not right, doing it like that." I managed a smile. "Not your fault, Jim. Take care of yourself." The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, holding my cardboard box of office detritus like a shield. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of Marcus watching from the end of the hallway, his face a mask of vindictive satisfaction. The lobby was mercifully empty as I crossed to the revolving doors and stepped out into the humid afternoon. Traffic crawled by, pedestrians rushed past, the world continuing its indifferent rotation despite the fact that my professional life had just imploded. I stood there, uncertain where to go next, the business card burning a hole in my pocket. My phone buzzed with notifications, colleagues expressing shock, a few brave souls offering support, my mother asking why HR had just called her emergency contact number. I ignored them all, hailed a cab, and gave the driver my address. The ride home was a blur. I stared out the window at the city rushing by, buildings and billboards melting together into a smear of concrete and neon. One billboard in particular caught my eye, a massive advertisement for Horizon Pulse's new software suite, the company logo emblazoned across 30 feet of prime advertising real estate. That logo, that name. My secret weapon. 3 years ago, when Horizon Pulse was still a promising startup and not the corporate behemoth it had become, I discovered a critical oversight. In the rush to secure funding and scale quickly, no one had properly registered the trademark for the company name. It was an amateur mistake, the kind I was specifically hired to prevent for clients. I'd brought it to Marcus's attention immediately, drafting the necessary paperwork for his signature. He dismissed me with a wave of his hand. "Legal mumbo-jumbo can wait. We're focused on growth right now. Just handle it." So I did. I handled it. But not in the way he assumed. I registered the trademark personally, under my own name, through a shell company I established specifically for this purpose. It was perfectly legal, if ethically questionable. An insurance policy I never thought I'd need to cash in. Until today. The cab pulled up to my apartment building, a modest mid-rise in a neighborhood that was perpetually up and coming, but never quite arriving. I paid the driver, carried my box of professional remnants inside, and set it down on my kitchen counter, next to yesterday's unwashed coffee mug. I should have felt devastated. For years of my career, gone in an instant, my professional reputation potentially in tatters. Instead, I felt oddly calm, like I was watching the situation unfold from a distance. I pulled Elise Reinhardt's business card from my pocket and ran my thumb across the embossed lettering. Prism Interactive. The name conjured images of light splitting into its component colors, revealing hidden depths and possibilities. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. That was quite the exit. Drinks? I know a place where the scotch is older than your former CEO's emotional maturity. I hesitated only briefly before replying, name the place. Her response came seconds later, the Obsidian, 8 p.m. Come as you are. Your corporate funeral deserves proper libations. I'd never been to the Obsidian. It was the kind of exclusive bar where memberships cost more than my monthly rent and the clientele included people whose net worth had too many zeros to comprehend. But tonight, I decided, I deserved a taste of that world. I changed out of my corporate armor, the pencil skirt and silk blouse that had felt like a costume for years, and into jeans and a simple black top. If Elise had wanted corporate Maya, she would have scheduled a proper interview, not drinks at an exclusive bar hours after witnessing my professional execution. The Obsidian was tucked away on the top floor of a historic building downtown, no signage, just a discreet elevator requiring a key card for access. I gave the attendant Elise's name, half expecting to be turned away. Instead, he nodded respectfully and ushered me inside. The bar was all dark wood, leather, and subtle lighting that made everyone look 10 years younger and $1 million richer. Elise sat at a corner table, still in her white suit, looking as if she'd stepped out of a luxury brand advertisement. She didn't stand when I approached, just gestured to the empty chair across from her. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality in a world of perpetual latecomers. A server materialized at my elbow, silent and efficient. Elise didn't ask what I wanted, just nodded. 2 Macallan 25, neat. When he departed, she finally looked at me directly, her gaze analytical but not unkind. How are you holding up? The question caught me off guard. I'd expected a business proposition, not concern for my emotional state. I'm processing. Fair enough. She sipped her water, leaving a perfect lipstick imprint on the glass. Marcus Harding has always been a special kind of fool. Talented in some ways, catastrophically blind in others. You know him? I asked, curiosity overriding my caution. We have history. Her smile was thin and sharp as a paper cut. But tonight isn't about Marcus. It's about you, Maya Sharma, and why you're exactly what Prism Interactive needs right now. The server returned with our drinks, amber liquid in crystal tumblers that caught the light like liquid gold. Elise raised hers in a subtle toast. To new beginnings, born from spectacular endings. I clinked my glass against hers and took a sip. The scotch was smooth as velvet, warming me from the inside out. I'll be direct, Elise continued, setting her glass down with precision. I've been watching your work for some time. Your approach to trademark protection, your innovative licensing strategies for Horizon's international markets, your handling of the Chinese counterfeiting case last year. Impressive, all of it. I blinked, caught off guard by her specific knowledge of my work. Thank you, but how? I make it my business to know talented people, especially when they're being wasted by competitors. She leaned forward slightly. What Marcus called quiet quitting looked to me like efficient time management and boundary setting. You accomplished more in your restricted hours than most of his team did in their 80-hour weeks. Her assessment was so matter-of-fact, so removed from the narrative Marcus had constructed, that I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen. I'm offering you a position at Prism, she continued. Director of Intellectual Property Strategy. You'd have your own team, budget autonomy, and a seat at the decision-making table. No performative hustle culture, no public humiliation as management technique. She took another sip of her scotch. And a 40% increase on whatever Horizon was paying you. It was too good to be true, too perfectly timed. My suspicious nature, honed by years of looking for legal loopholes and hidden clauses, kicked in. Why me? Why now? It can't be coincidence that you were there today. Elise's expression didn't change, but something like respect flickered in her eyes. Good. Question everything. No, it wasn't coincidence. I was there for a preliminary meeting about potentially acquiring one of Horizon's subsidiaries. Your dismissal was an unexpected floor show. She set her tumbler down with a soft clink against the polished wood. As for why you, your reputation precedes you. The legal community is smaller than people think, and good trademark attorneys with strategic minds are rare. I've had my eye on you for approximately 8 months. And if I tell you I own the trademark to Horizon Pulse? The words slipped out before I could reconsider, the scotch perhaps loosening my usual caution. Elise didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Instead, a slow smile spread across her face, the first genuine one I'd seen. Then I'd say my instincts about you were even better than I thought. She leaned back, studying me with new interest. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her about finding the oversight, about Marcus dismissing my concerns, about registering the trademark myself as protection. I explained the shell company, the annual renewal fees I paid personally, the documentation. Safely stored in a safety deposit box at a bank downtown. When I finished, Elise was silent for a long moment. Then she laughed, a rich, genuine sound that turned heads across the bar. Maya Sharma, you are even more valuable than I realized. She signaled for another round. So what's your plan? I assume you have one. I hesitated. I hadn't planned on being fired today. No, but you've been preparing for something. People don't secure trademarks to their employer's name without envisioning some eventual purpose. She was right. In the back of my mind, I'd always seen it as leverage for negotiation, a safety net if things went south. Well, things had certainly gone south now. I want to do it right, I said finally. Not out of vengeance, but because it's legally mine. And he needs to understand there are consequences to his actions. Elise nodded approvingly. A measured approach. I respect that. She raised her freshly refilled glass. Here's what I propose, you come work for Prism, bringing your considerable talents, and your interesting legal position, with you. We'll provide the resources and legal backing to handle the Horizon situation appropriately. No scorched earth. Just, calculated consequences. The offer was tempting, almost too perfect. And what does Prism get out of my trademark ownership? Her smile widened. Smart question. We get leverage in upcoming negotiations, potential licensing revenue, and the immense satisfaction of watching Marcus Harding realize he's been outplayed. At his own game. Plus, of course, your expertise applied to our own intellectual property portfolio. I considered her offer, turning it over in my mind like a complex puzzle. Working for Prism would give me resources, protection, and the platform to use my unexpected advantage effectively. And after today's humiliation, the thought of turning the tables on Marcus held undeniable appeal. Do we have a deal, Maya? Elise extended her hand across the table. I took it, her grip firm and confident. We do, on one condition. She raised an eyebrow, waiting. When the time comes to inform Marcus about the trademark situation, I want to be the one to do it. Elise's smile was pure satisfaction. I wouldn't have it any other way. We clinked glasses again, sealing our agreement with 30-year-old scotch and shared purpose. As I took another sip, warming from within, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. For years, I'd been playing defense, protecting other people's intellectual property, guarding my own secrets, weathering Marcus's management by intimidation. Now, for the first time, I was on offense. And I had the ultimate trump card hidden in plain sight. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Elise reminded me as we parted ways outside the Obsidian. The security desk will be expecting you. And Maya? She paused, her expression unreadable in the glow of the street lamps. Wear something that makes you feel powerful. First impressions matter, especially second ones. I nodded, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline of the day began to fade. I'll be there. I walked home instead of taking a cab, needing the cool night air to clear my head. The city looked different somehow, the familiar streets holding new possibilities. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of something new, not just a job, but a reckoning. The trademark to Horizon Pulse, registered in my name, would no longer be just an insurance policy. It would be a weapon, precisely aimed and perfectly legal. And I would be the one with my finger on the trigger. Prism Interactive's headquarters looked like it had been transported from a sleek Scandinavian design magazine, all clean lines, natural light, and strategic pops of color. The lobby featured a wall of cascading water over black stone, the company logo projected in subtle light against the rippling surface. It smelled like eucalyptus and ambition, a far cry from Horizon Pulse's aggressive cologne and desperation. I'd taken Elise's advice, wearing a dark blue suit that I'd splurged on months ago but never had the courage to wear to Horizon. Marcus had once commented that flashy dressing was compensating for mediocre performance. Today, the suit felt like armor, perfectly tailored to the new version of myself I was stepping into. The receptionist greeted me with professional warmth, no trace of curiosity or judgment. Ms. Sharma, welcome to Prism. Ms. Reinhardt is expecting you on the 18th floor. She handed me a sleek access card. The elevator will take you directly up. Unlike the performative security theater at Horizon, where visitor badges practically screamed outsider. This card looked identical to the ones I saw employees swiping as they moved through the lobby. A small detail, but it spoke volumes about company culture. The elevator ascended smoothly, no jarring stops or corporate announcements piped through tinny speakers. When the doors opened, Elise was waiting, looking exactly as she had yesterday, composed, elegant, radiating quiet authority. "Right on time," she said, extending her hand. "Welcome to Prism." She led me through an open workspace that hummed with focused energy. People looked up briefly as we passed, nodding acknowledgments before returning to their tasks. No theatrical hustle, no performative stress, just competent professionals doing their jobs. "Our legal department occupies this entire floor," Elise explained as we walked. "Intellectual property is our backbone, we protect it fiercely for ourselves and our clients." We passed meeting rooms with glass walls, inside which small groups collaborated around digital displays. One room caught my attention, a whiteboard, covered with familiar-looking diagrams. "Is that," I began, stopping mid-sentence. Elise followed my gaze and nodded. "The Nexus Protocol." "Yes. We've been working on a competitor to Horizon's flagship product for some time." The diagrams looked remarkably similar to frameworks I'd helped develop at Horizon. Not identical, but sharing clear DNA. "I'm going to be direct with you, Maya," Elise said, guiding me into a private office with a spectacular view of the city. "We've had our eye on Horizon's technology for some time. Their approach to integrated brand management has merit, though their execution is flawed." She gestured for me to sit in a comfortable chair across from her desk. Unlike Marcus's office, with its imposing desk designed to intimidate visitors, Elisa's workspace felt designed for collaboration, the furniture arranged to minimize power distance. "I'll be equally direct," I replied, settling into the chair. "Those diagrams look very similar to work I helped develop." "They should. We hired Julian Chen 6 months ago." The name hit me like a splash of cold water. Julian had been a promising developer at Horizon until he abruptly resigned last year after a particularly brutal dressing down from Marcus during a product review. "Julian brought valuable insights," Elise continued, watching my reaction carefully. "But technical architecture is only part of the equation. We've been missing the strategic vision, particularly around intellectual property integration and brand protection." She leaned forward slightly. "That's where you come in." A tablet on her desk flared to life. She turned it toward me, revealing a detailed organizational chart with an empty box near the top labeled Director of IP Strategy. "This would be you," she said. "Overseeing a team of 8, with direct reporting lines to both me and our Chief Legal Officer. Your first priority would be finalizing our IP strategy for the Nexus Protocol launch, ensuring we're not vulnerable to challenges from competitors." A pause, meaningful. "Including Horizon." The implication was clear, they wanted me for my expertise, but also for my unique leverage against my former employer. "And the trademark situation?" I asked, maintaining a neutral tone. Elisa's expression remained impassive. "An unexpected advantage, certainly. How we utilize it would be largely your decision, though I'd expect us to approach it strategically, rather than vindicatively." "I'm not interested in revenge," I clarified. "Just appropriate consequences." Her smile was subtle but appreciative. "That's precisely why you're sitting here, Maya. Emotional reactivity makes for poor business decisions. Strategic responses, however." She left the thought unfinished. For the next hour, we discussed specifics: salary, generous, benefits, comprehensive, expectations, high but reasonable, and timeline, aggressive but achievable. By the time we concluded, my head was spinning with possibilities. "Take the day to think it over," Elise said as we stood. "We'll need your answer by tomorrow morning if you're joining us. The Nexus launch is scheduled for 8 weeks from now, and we need our IP strategy locked down." I nodded, processing everything. "One question before I go. Why were you really at that meeting yesterday? It seems too convenient that you happened to witness my firing." Elisa's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Respect, perhaps. Intelligence suggested Horizon was preparing to announce a major acquisition. I wanted to assess Marcus's demeanor personally. She shrugged slightly. "Your termination was unexpected theater, but it confirmed what we already knew about his leadership style." As she walked me back to the elevator, she added casually, "By the way, that subsidiary Horizon is planning to acquire? Their brand architecture is a mess, inconsistent trademarks, expired registrations in key markets. The type of detail someone might overlook if they were more focused on quarterly earnings than foundational legal protection." The elevator doors opened. "Should you accept our offer, that might be something worth examining early on," she said with the faintest hint of a smile. I left Prism feeling something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine excitement about work. Not just the satisfaction of solving legal puzzles, but the thrill of building something meaningful with people who valued expertise over theatrics. My phone buzzed as I reached the street. A text from an unknown number. Drinks tonight? Need to talk. It's important. Rachel. Rachel had been my closest colleague at Horizon, though close was relative in a culture that treated friendship as inefficiency. We met at a quiet bar several blocks from both Prism and Horizon, neutral territory. Rachel arrived looking harried, glancing over her shoulder as she slid into the booth across from me. You okay? I asked as she ordered a double vodka soda. Not really. She leaned forward, voice low. Things have gone insane since yesterday. Marcus called an all-hands immediately after you left. Gave this terrifying speech about loyalty and commitment, made not-so-subtle threats about identifying other quiet quitters. People are panicking, working until midnight to prove their dedication. I winced. I'm sorry. I never meant, this isn't on you, she interrupted firmly. It's been building for months. Your firing was just the match to the gasoline. She took a deep swallow of her drink when it arrived. But that's not why I texted. Something weird is happening with the Horizon rollout. Marcus pulled the entire legal team into a war room this morning, no phones allowed. Apparently, there's some issue with documentation for the new acquisition. My pulse quickened. What kind of issue? No one's saying exactly, but the legal team looks terrified. And, she hesitated. Tyler from legal let slip that it involves trademark verification. Marcus is on the warpath, demanding to know how something fundamental could have been overlooked. I kept my expression carefully neutral, though my mind was racing. Could they have discovered the trademark situation already? It seemed unlikely. I'd been meticulous about the registration, using a shell company with no obvious connection to me. There's more, Rachel continued, looking increasingly uncomfortable. He specifically asked about your files, your projects. Security escorted your former assistant to the server room to identify all your digital archives. They're combing through everything. Cold unease settled in my stomach. They won't find anything improper. Maybe not, but Marcus is constructing a narrative. He's already hinting to the executive team that you may have compromised company interests. There's talk of legal action, Maya. This was moving faster than I'd anticipated. Marcus wasn't just licking his wounds, he was actively laying groundwork to come after me, perhaps sensing that his hasty firing might have consequences. Thank you for telling me, I said, reaching across to squeeze her hand briefly. You're taking a risk. Rachel's smile was grim. We all are, every day we stay there. I've updated my resume, actually. She trailed off, looking suddenly vulnerable. I saw what happened to you. I can't let that be me next quarter. We talked a while. Longer, Rachel sharing the office gossip about my spectacular exit and Elisa's unexpected appearance. Apparently, Marcus had been in a foul mood since, snapping at executives and disappearing into closed-door meetings with legal counsel. After Rachel left, I sat alone, nursing my drink and considering my options. The timeline had accelerated. If Horizon was already investigating trademark issues, it wouldn't be long before they discovered the truth. I needed to move first. I pulled out my phone and texted Elise, I'm in. When can I start? Her response came within seconds, tomorrow. 8 a.m. We have work to do. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with possibilities, strategies, contingencies. By dawn, I'd made my decision. This wouldn't be about revenge, it would be about reset. A recalibration of power, a demonstration of consequences. Prism's offices were already humming with activity when I arrived the next morning. Elise met me at the elevator, a knowing look in her eyes. You've made a decision about the trademark, she said, not a question but an observation. I nodded. I want to approach this properly. Not as an ambush, but as a business negotiation. Tell me your plan. We walked to her office as I outlined my strategy. When I finished, Elise was silent for a moment, considering. Elegant, she finally said. Clean, professional, legally sound. Exactly the approach I'd hoped you'd take. She tapped her fingers lightly on her desk. You have my full support. Use whatever resources you need. For the next 3 days, I immersed myself in Prism's operations, learning systems, meeting my team, and quietly preparing my move. My new colleagues were competent, curious, and remarkably free of the political maneuvering that had characterized every interaction at Horizon. On my 4th day, Julian Chen, my former colleague from Horizon, stopped by my office, looking both nervous and determined. I heard you joined us, he said, hovering in the doorway. Wasn't sure if you'd want to see me, considering you left without saying goodbye and apparently brought some of our work with you. I kept my tone light, but the question was real. Julian winced. It wasn't like that. I didn't take code or proprietary materials. Just ideas. Approaches we discussed that Marcus shot down. He stepped further into my office, lowering his voice. After that last product review, when he humiliated me in front of everyone, I knew I had to leave before I broke completely. I nodded, understanding all too well. You don't need to explain, Julian. We've all got our breaking points. Relief washed over his face. So we're good? We're good. In fact, I could use your help with something. I explained what I needed: technical documentation proving that Prism's Nexus protocol, while similar in concept to Horizon's product, had been independently developed with distinct architecture and implementation. Julian's eyes widened as he grasped the implications. You're going after them, aren't you? Over the trademark? Not going after them. Just ensuring proper licensing arrangements are in place. I smiled. Very standard legal procedure. Julian's answering grin held a hint of vengeful satisfaction. I'll have those documents to you by tomorrow morning. Properly notarized and timestamped. By the end of my first week, everything was in place. With Elisa's approval, I drafted a formal letter on Prism letterhead, attaching certified copies of the trademark registration and a proposed licensing agreement. The terms were fair, generous even, but unmistakably positioned me as the rightful owner of the Horizon Pulse name. Are you sure about this? Elise asked as we reviewed the final documents. Once this leaves our office, there's no turning back. I considered her question carefully. Was I sure? This action would fundamentally alter the power dynamic with my former employer, potentially triggering legal battles and certainly creating professional ripples. But the alternative, allowing Marcus to continue wielding power without consequence, to humiliate others as he'd humiliated me, was unacceptable. I'm sure, I said firmly. It's time. The letter was delivered by courier the following Monday morning, time to arrive during Horizon's weekly executive meeting. I imagined the scene: Marcus holding court, berating someone for missing targets, or failing to demonstrate adequate hustle when a seemingly innocuous legal document landed in his lap. I didn't have to imagine for long. At 10:37 a.m., my phone lit up with a text from Rachel. Holy shit. What did you do? A second later, my email pinged with a meeting request from Elise, my office. Now. I found her standing by the window, a subtle smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It's begun, she said without turning. Marcus just called our general counsel, demanding an immediate meeting. He sounded, and I quote, apoplectic with rage. Did he threaten legal action? Of course. Our counsel reminded him that trademark law is quite clear, and that your registration predates any claims Horizon might make. She turned to face me. He's requested a meeting. Tomorrow, neutral location. He wants to resolve this matter privately. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. Will you be there? Absolutely. This is now a Prism matter as much as a personal one. Her eyes gleamed with something like anticipation. Besides, I wouldn't miss it for the world. The restaurant Marcus chose for our meeting was precisely the kind of place I'd expected: expensive, ostentatious, designed to intimidate through exclusivity. A power move, transparent as glass. Elise and I arrived 15 minutes early, securing the prime table with the best sightlines and most comfortable seating. Another small but meaningful advantage. Remember, Elise murmured as we waited, you hold all the legal cards. Don't let him rattle you with bluster or threats. Stay calm, stay professional. I nodded, running through mental scenarios, preparing responses to likely tactics. When Marcus finally strode in, 10 minutes late, of course, his face was a rigid mask of controlled fury. Behind him trailed Harvey Klein, Horizon's longtime legal counsel, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Ms. Sharma, Marcus said tightly, not offering his hand. Ms. Reinhardt. Mr. Harding, Elise replied smoothly. Please, join us. We've taken the liberty of ordering coffee. They sat stiffly, Marcus practically vibrating with suppressed rage. Harvey placed a leather portfolio on the table, clearing his throat nervously. Let's dispense with pleasantries, Marcus began, his voice dangerously soft. This. He tapped the copy of my letter he'd brought, is nothing short of corporate sabotage. You deliberately concealed your actions, misappropriated company resources, and are now attempting extortion. I met his gaze steadily. That's an interesting interpretation, Mr. Harding. However, the facts are simple. When I brought the trademark oversight to your attention 3 years ago, you explicitly instructed me to handle it. I did so, following all legal requirements and using my own personal funds. The registration is valid, current, and indisputable. Harvey shifted uncomfortably. Maya, surely you understand the ethical implications. I understand them perfectly, I interrupted, keeping my voice level. Just as I understand the legal reality. The trademark for Horizon Pulse is registered to Sharma Holdings LLC, which I control. I'm offering a fair licensing arrangement that allows Horizon to continue using the name while properly compensating the trademark holder. Marcus's face darkened to an alarming shade of crimson. This is blackmail. You're leveraging a technical oversight to extort money from the company that employed you. Not blackmail, Elise interjected smoothly. Standard intellectual property licensing. The kind of arrangement corporations engage in every day. She smiled thinly. I believe. Your recent acquisition of Tech Dynamics included several licensing agreements for patents they didn't own. This is no different. I watched realization dawn on Marcus's face. She knew about the acquisition, understood the parallels, and was subtly letting him know how much information Prism had about Horizon's operations. We will fight this, Marcus declared, jabbing a finger toward me. We'll tie you up in litigation for years. I'll make sure every technology company in the city knows you're a corporate saboteur. I'd anticipated this reaction, the threatened scorched earth response, the personal attacks. Instead of rising to the bait, I simply opened my portfolio and slid across a single sheet of paper. This is a press release drafted by Prism's communications team, ready for distribution tomorrow morning. It announces my role as Prism's new Director of IP Strategy and includes a brief mention of the licensing arrangement being negotiated with Horizon Pulse regarding their continued use of their trademarked name. I paused, letting the implications sink in. Very standard corporate announcement. Nothing sensational. Marcus scanned the document, his expression hardening. The threat was clear: if he chose war, the first casualty would be Horizon's reputation. Investors, partners, and customers would learn that the company had operated for years without securing its own name, a fundamental oversight that would raise serious questions about Horizon's due diligence and Marcus's leadership. Harvey leaned over, whispering urgently in Marcus's ear. The older man's legal experience clearly told him this was a losing battle, one that could damage Horizon far more than the cost of a licensing agreement. What are your terms? Harvey asked, taking control of the conversation as Marcus fumed. Silently. I slid across another document, the licensing agreement I'd prepared. 3-year renewable license. Annual fee of $750,000, payable quarterly. Horizon retains full usage rights for the duration, with standard quality control provisions to protect the trademark's value. Harvey quickly reviewed the document, his eyebrows rising slightly. These terms are surprisingly reasonable. I'm not interested in crippling Horizon, I said honestly. I just want fair compensation for a valuable asset that I legally own. Marcus looked ready to explode, but Harvey placed a restraining hand on his arm. We'll need to review this with our board, of course. Of course, I agreed. You have until Friday. After that, we'll need to proceed with our public announcement, which will necessarily include clarification about the trademark situation. As Harvey gathered the documents, Marcus finally spoke, his voice low and venomous. You won't get away with this. You think you've won, but I have resources, connections, Mr. Harding, Elise interrupted, her tone pleasant but with steel underneath. Threats rarely improve negotiating positions. Maya has offered fair terms for a clean resolution. I suggest you consider them carefully. She stood, signaling the end of our meeting. I followed suit, maintaining the composed, professional demeanor I'd held throughout. We look forward to hearing from you by Friday, I said, extending my hand to Harvey, who shook it quickly. Marcus ignored my outstretched hand, turning abruptly and striding from the restaurant. Harvey lingered briefly. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I advised him to secure the trademark properly 3 years ago. And I advised against firing you the way he did. He offered a tired smile. Sometimes the clients most in need of legal counsel are the least likely to take it. After they left, Elise and I remained at the table, the tension slowly dissipating. Well played, she said, raising her water glass in a subtle toast. Firm but not vindictive. Professional throughout. Do you think they'll accept? Harvey. We'll make sure of it. He knows exactly how damaging a public battle would be. She studied me thoughtfully. How do you feel? I considered the question. Did I feel triumphant? Vindicated? The emotions were more complex than I'd expected. I feel recalibrated, I finally answered. Like something that was out of alignment has been set right. Elise nodded approvingly. The best victories often feel that way, not like conquests, but like corrections. As we walked back to Prism's offices, I realized something fundamental had shifted. For years, I'd operated in Marcus's shadow, navigating his moods, anticipating his criticism, shrinking myself to avoid his wrath. Now I stood in my own light, neither diminished by his presence nor defined by his absence. The trademark, my hidden insurance policy, had been the catalyst, but the true transformation ran deeper. I'd reclaimed not just a legal right, but my professional worth. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Office is chaos. Marcus locked in with board members. Harvey running around with legal docs. What is happening? I smiled to myself, typing back, just a minor trademark matter. Nothing to worry about. Dinner soon? As Elise and I reached Prism's building, she paused, turning to face me fully. You know, most people would have used that trademark as a weapon of revenge. Few would have seen it as a tool for realignment. Revenge burns out quickly, I replied. I'm playing a longer game. Her answering smile was one of genuine approval. That's precisely why you belong at Prism. Now, shall we get back to building something worth protecting? I nodded, following her into the building that already felt more like home than Horizon ever had. The trademark matter would resolve itself. Now, Harvey would ensure the board accepted my reasonable terms, Marcus would fume but ultimately comply, and life would move forward. But something more valuable had already been secured, not just a licensing fee, but a reclamation of power. I had transformed from someone who could be discarded in a public spectacle to someone whose name appeared on legal documents that made powerful men squirm in their expensive suits. Quiet quitting, Marcus had called it. But there had been nothing quiet about my exit, and I certainly wasn't quitting. I was just getting started. The cease and desist letter arrived on Tuesday morning, delivered by courier to Prism's front desk. The envelope was heavy, cream-colored stock with the Horizon Pulse logo embossed in glossy black, the very logo I now technically owned. Irony at its finest. I sat in my new office, blinds half drawn against the morning glare, examining the document without opening it. 3 weeks had passed since our restaurant meeting. 3 weeks of silence from Marcus, though Harvey had sent a terse email confirming the board was reviewing the proposed licensing arrangement. This envelope suggested their review had concluded. My office phone buzzed. Maya, Elise would like to see you in the conference room, her assistant's voice informed me. She says to bring the letter. Elise was waiting with James Chen, Prism's general counsel, a sharp-minded attorney with a reputation for turning legal battles into chess matches he rarely lost. Their expressions gave nothing away as I placed the unopened envelope on the conference table. Aren't you going to open it? James asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. I shrugged. I thought we might enjoy the suspense together. Elise's lips quirked upward. How considerate. I slit the envelope open with a letter opener and extracted several pages of heavyweight legal stationery. The first paragraph confirmed my suspicions. This was indeed a cease and desist, claiming my trademark registration constituted fraudulent misappropriation and breach of fiduciary duty. It demanded immediate transfer of the trademark to Horizon Pulse, a written apology, and my resignation from Prism Interactive. Well, I said, sliding the letter across to James, it appears Marcus has chosen the hard way. James scanned the document, his expression shifting from interest to incredulity. This is. He searched for the right word, desperate. The legal arguments are flimsy at best, contradictory at worst. He tapped a paragraph on the second page. There simultaneously. Claiming you had no authority to register the trademark and that you were acting as their agent when you did so. Those positions are mutually exclusive. Elise took the letter next, reading it with clinical detachment. What's your assessment, James? It's a bluff, he replied confidently. If they had a solid case, they'd have filed an actual lawsuit. Not sent a cease and desist with this many logical holes. They're hoping to intimidate Maya into surrendering the trademark without litigation. And if I don't? I asked. Then they have to decide whether to back down or escalate to actual legal proceedings, which would open them to discovery. James's smile was thin. Something tells me there are aspects of this situation they'd prefer not to have documented in court records. Elise turned to me. Maya, this is ultimately your decision. The trademark belongs to you, not Prism. While we support you, we won't dictate your response. I appreciated her clarity. Despite Prism's interest in the outcome, Elise was giving me genuine agency in the decision, something Marcus never would have done. I'd like to respond, I said after a moment, but not with another letter. I think it's time for a more direct approach. James raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? A meeting. In person. Just me and Marcus. Elise frowned. Are you sure that's wise? Marcus has already demonstrated unpredictable behavior. It's precisely because of his unpredictability that a meeting makes sense, I explained. Marcus operates on emotion thinly disguised as business strategy. Letters and legal documents only inflame his sense of persecution. But face to face? He'll feel like he has the advantage. Which he won't, James said, understanding dawning on his face. Exactly. Marcus thinks in terms of dominance, bigger offices, louder voices, public displays of power. But this isn't about dominance. It's about facts, records, and law, areas where his intimidation tactics are irrelevant. Elise studied me for a long moment. You know him well. For years of navigating his volatility taught me his patterns, I replied. He's predictable in his unpredictability. After discussing the potential risks and advantages, we agreed on a strategy. James drafted a brief response to the cease and desist, proposing a private meeting between Marcus and me, without lawyers present, to explore an amicable resolution before further legal escalation becomes necessary. We sent it by courier that afternoon. The response came within hours, a terse email from Marcus's assistant confirming a meeting for tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. at the Clifton, an exclusive restaurant known for its private dining rooms and discretion. The timing was deliberate, I knew, late. Enough to ensure I'd be tired, hungry, and potentially off balance. He's still playing power games, I told Elise when I showed her the confirmation. Choosing the venue, dictating the time. Let him have the small victories, she advised. They'll make him overconfident. That night, I prepared meticulously, not just reviewing documentation and rehearsing talking points, but also considering the psychological dynamics that would be in play. Marcus would expect me to be either confrontational or intimidated. He wouldn't anticipate calm, factual discussion. The Clifton was all old-world opulence, dark wood, leather upholstery, discreet lighting that flattered aging executives. I arrived 15 minutes early, but was informed that Mr. Harding had already been seated in a private room at the back. Another power move, establishing himself in the territory before my arrival. A host led me through the main dining area to a secluded room with a single table. Marcus sat facing the door, nursing what appeared to be a scotch, neat. He didn't stand when I entered. Maya, he said, his tone falsely cordial. Punctual as always. Marcus, I replied, taking the seat across from him without waiting for an invitation. Thank you for agreeing to meet. A server materialized silently, asking for my drink order. I requested sparkling water with lime, I wanted absolute clarity tonight. Marcus leaned back, studying me with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. I have to admit, I underestimated you. The trademark maneuver was unexpected. It wasn't a maneuver, I corrected gently. Just proper legal protection for an intellectual property asset. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Let's not play games, Maya. You deliberately concealed your actions, bided your time, then struck when you thought I was vulnerable. Is that how you see it? I kept my voice neutral. I registered the trademark after you explicitly told me to handle it. I used my personal funds, my personal time, and followed every legal requirement. There was no concealment, just your lack of interest in the details. The server returned with my water. Marcus waited until we were alone again before continuing. The board is prepared to take this to court, he said, his tone hardening. We have resources you can't imagine. We'll bury you in legal motions until you crack under the pressure and expense. I took a sip of my water, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably before responding. That would be unfortunate, for Horizon. Is that a threat? His knuckles whitened around his glass. Just an observation. Court proceedings are public record. Imagine the headlines: Tech CEO fails to secure company's own name, sues former employee who did it properly. Investors tend to get nervous about that kind of fundamental oversight. Marcus's jaw tightened. You're playing a dangerous game. No game, I replied calmly. Just business. I'm offering a standard licensing arrangement at fair market value. You're the one turning this into a personal vendetta. Because it is personal. The words erupted from him with sudden force. You betrayed the company, betrayed me. I protected an asset that you dismissed as unimportant, I interrupted, keeping my voice steady. And I did it properly, legally, with my own resources. That's not betrayal, Marcus. That's exactly what you hired me to do, protect intellectual property. He stared at me, momentarily thrown by my calm demeanor. He'd expected defensiveness, perhaps fear or anger. My composure was disorienting him. What do you really want? He finally asked, a calculating look replacing his anger. Is this about money? A better settlement package? Your old job back? I couldn't help but laugh, a genuine, surprised sound that seemed to startle him. My old job? Why would I want that? Prism can't offer you what Horizon can, he said, leaning forward. We're positioned for exponential growth this year. The Tech Dynamics acquisition opens markets Prism can't touch. I could bring you back. As VP of Legal Affairs. Triple your former salary. The offer was so unexpected that for a moment I could only stare at him. Marcus Harding, who had humiliated me in front of colleagues, was now offering me a promotion and raise? Let me be clear, I said finally. I have no interest in returning to Horizon. Not for any title, not for any salary. His expression hardened again. Then what do you want? Revenge? Consequences, I corrected. There's a difference. Semantics. No. Revenge is emotional. Consequences are educational. He scoffed. And what lesson am I supposed to learn? From this corporate hostage-taking? I considered my words carefully. This was the heart of it, what I really wanted him to understand. That people aren't disposable, Marcus. That how you treat others has tangible impacts on your business. That humiliating a team member in public might feel powerful in the moment, but creates lasting vulnerabilities you can't predict. Something shifted in his expression, not softening, exactly, but a flicker of recognition. The licensing agreement is straightforward, I continued. $750,000 annually for 3 years, renewable thereafter. Horizon keeps its name, I receive fair compensation for my property, and we both move forward. And if I refuse? Then I'll be forced to protect my trademark through other means. That could include licensing it to another entity or enforcing my rights against unauthorized usage. I let that sink in. I'd prefer not to take that route. Marcus was silent for several long moments, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost some of its edge. The board won't agree to perpetual payments. They'll see it as extortion. Then propose an alternative, I suggested. A lump sum buyout of the trademark, perhaps. I'm open to reasonable solutions. He considered this. $2 million. One-time payment. You transfer all rights to Horizon. $5 million, I countered. Market value for an established brand identity in the tech sector, particularly one central to an acquisition strategy. His eyebrows rose. $3 million, and we include a non-disparagement clause. You never discuss the circumstances of your departure or this arrangement. $4 million, I said firmly. And mutual non-disparagement. I won't discuss Horizons oversight, and you stop suggesting I engaged in corporate sabotage. Marcus studied me with new eyes, not as a former subordinate but as an equal negotiator. You've changed. No, I corrected him. I've always been this person. You just never bothered to see it. Something like respect flickered across his face, quickly suppressed. I'll take your counteroffer to the board. $4 million, mutual. Non-disparagement, clean transfer of trademark rights. I'll have my attorney draft the agreement. Use Harvey, he suggested unexpectedly. He already understands the situation, and he's expressed concerns about our legal position. I nodded, surprising myself by feeling a twinge of sympathy for Marcus. Having your own legal counsel tell you you're wrong couldn't be easy for someone with his ego. As we prepared to leave, Marcus hesitated, then asked, was it worth it? Jumping to Prism just to leverage this against me? I didn't join Prism to use the trademark against you, I clarified. I joined because they value expertise over theater, substance over spectacle. The trademark situation was separate, a consequence of choices you made long before my firing. He absorbed this, his expression unreadable. And are you happy there? The question seemed genuinely curious, almost vulnerable. For a moment, I glimpsed the insecurity that drove his bluster, a fear that others might succeed where he struggled, might find fulfillment he couldn't quite grasp. Yes, I answered honestly. I am. He nodded once, accepting this with surprising grace. Good luck, Maya. I suspect you won't need it, but good luck anyway. We parted without handshakes or further pleasantries. As I stepped into the cool evening air, I felt oddly unburdened, not by the prospect of $4 million, but by the realization that Marcus no longer held any power over me, not even the power to provoke anger or resentment. The next morning, Harvey called to confirm the board had accepted our terms, with one modification: they wanted the agreement finalized within 7 days, before their next investor briefing. I agreed, and by the following week, the documents were signed, the transfer arranged, and the payment scheduled. $4 million. The figure still seemed surreal. After taxes and setting aside a prudent reserve, I established a foundation focused on providing legal support to employees facing workplace harassment and discrimination. Poetic justice, perhaps, but it felt right, transforming the consequence. of Marcus's actions into a resource for others who might face similar situations. At Prism, life settled into a rhythm that felt both challenging and sustainable. My team was talented and engaged, the projects intellectually stimulating, and the culture refreshingly free of artificial urgency and performative stress. Elise proved to be exactly the kind of leader I'd hoped, demanding excellence but providing the resources and support to achieve it. 2 months after finalizing the trademark transfer, Prism launched the Nexus protocol to considerable industry acclaim. The platform integrated brand management with real-time trademark monitoring in ways that made Horizon's offering seem clunky and outdated by comparison. Without the distraction of the trademark dispute, my team had refined the intellectual property components to near perfection. The morning after the successful launch, Elise called me into her office. Unlike our previous meetings, this one had no preamble, no context. "I owe you an explanation," she said without ceremony, gesturing for me to sit. "About?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "About why I was really at Horizon that day." She poured us both coffee from a sleek thermal carafe. It wasn't coincidence, and it wasn't just about assessing Marcus's acquisition plans. I'd suspected as much but had never pressed the issue, trusting that Elise had her reasons. 3 years ago, Marcus Harding fired me, she continued, her voice matter of fact. Not as publicly as he fired you, but with similar disregard for professional norms. I was Chief Innovation Officer at Horizon. This was before it became Horizon Pulse, back when it was still called TechSphere Solutions. The revelation stunned me. Despite all our conversations, all our strategizing around the trademark situation, Elise had never mentioned this connection. "Marcus and I co-founded the company," she explained. "We had different visions from the start. I wanted to build something sustainable, focused on genuine innovation. He wanted rapid growth, venture capital, quick exits. When we secured our first major funding round, the investors sided with his approach. He engineered a board vote to remove me, claiming my cautious methodology was impeding growth potential." "I had no idea," I said, trying to absorb this new information. "Nothing in my research on Horizon ever mentioned you as a co-founder." Her smile was thin. "Marcus is thorough when erasing inconvenient history. He had my name removed from all company materials, bought out my shares at a fraction of their value, and made my departure a condition of the funding round. So when you approached me that night, it wasn't random opportunity," she acknowledged. "I'd been watching Horizon, and you, for some time. Your trademark registration caught my attention during routine competitive analysis. It was elegant, forward-thinking, exactly the kind of strategic move I value." "You knew about the trademark before my firing?" I asked, pieces falling into place. I knew someone had registered it properly, and I suspected it wasn't Horizon officially. "When I confirmed it was you personally, I became interested in your work. Your handling of the Chinese counterfeiting case last year was particularly impressive." I sat back, processing this revelation. "So you were already planning to recruit me?" "Planning is perhaps too strong. Let's say I had identified you as someone worth watching." She sipped her coffee. "Your public firing simply accelerated the timeline." "Why tell me this now?" I asked, curious about the timing of this disclosure. "Because you deserve to know the full context of your position here. And because after yesterday's successful launch, the board has approved my recommendation for your promotion to Chief Intellectual Property Officer, with an equity stake in Prism." The offer took me completely by surprise. "Chief Officer? But I've only been here a few months." "Time is a poor metric for value," Elise replied. "Your contributions to the Nexus protocol alone would justify the promotion. Your handling of the Horizon situation demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need at the executive level." The opportunity was extraordinary, not just the title or the equity, but the chance to shape intellectual property strategy for an entire organization, to build something truly innovative without the suffocating weight of ego-driven leadership. "There's something else you should know," Elise added. "Marcus Harding resigned as CEO of Horizon Pulse yesterday. The official announcement cites personal reasons, but my sources indicate the board lost confidence after the trademark situation came to light. The $4 million payment appeared in their quarterly financials, raising questions they couldn't adequately answer. I absorbed this news with mixed emotions. I hadn't wanted to destroy Marcus, only to establish consequences for his actions. Yet there was undeniable symmetry in his departure, a closing of a circle that had begun with my public humiliation. "Do you regret how things unfolded?" Elise asked, watching me closely. I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally. "Not the outcome, certainly. Perhaps some of the process. I never intended to force him out." "You didn't," Elise clarified. His own actions did that. The trademark situation was merely the catalyst that exposed larger issues with his leadership. The board had concerns for months: declining innovation, talent retention problems, deteriorating culture. She was right, of course. Marcus had created the conditions for his own downfall long before I entered the picture. My actions had simply illuminated what was already there. About the promotion, I said, returning to the matter at hand. I'd like some time to consider it. Elise nodded, unsurprised. Of course. It's a significant step. Take the weekend to think it over. As I left her office, my mind was already racing with possibilities. Chief Intellectual Property Officer. An equity stake. A seat at the executive table where decisions were made not through intimidation but through collaboration and expertise. Back in my office, I found an email from Rachel. She'd finally left Horizon, accepting a position at a promising startup founded by former colleagues who'd also fled Marcus's toxic leadership. Attached was a photo of her smiling beside a sleek standing desk, caption reading, "New beginnings. No more 80-hour weeks or public executions." I smiled, genuinely happy for her escape. The exodus had begun even before Marcus's resignation. Talented people voting with their feet, choosing cultures that valued their contributions over their capacity for suffering. My phone buzzed with a news alert, the official announcement of Marcus's departure. The stock was down 7% on the news, analysts questioning the abruptness of the transition and the lack of succession planning. I felt no glee, no vindictive satisfaction. Instead, there was a quiet sense of resolution, of balance restored. Marcus had built his career on the premise that people were expendable, that fear motivated better than respect. That premise had finally proven faulty, not through my actions alone, but through the cumulative impact of his leadership style. As I considered Elise's offer, I realized that my journey had never been about the trademark itself. That was just the tangible manifestation of a deeper truth: that value doesn't diminish because someone fails to recognize it. My skills, my strategic thinking, my professional worth had always been there, whether Marcus acknowledged them or not. The quiet quitter he'd so publicly dismissed had rebuilt her career on the very foundation he'd tried to destroy. Not through hustle culture or theatrical demonstrations of commitment, but through precision, expertise, and the courage to stand firm when it mattered most. On Monday morning, I arrived at Prism earlier than usual. Elise was already in her office, reviewing reports with her characteristic focus. "I've considered your offer," I said without preamble. She looked up, setting aside her tablet. "And I accept, with one condition." Her eyebrow raised slightly, inviting me to continue. "I want to establish a mentorship program for legal professionals transitioning from toxic work environments. Too many talented people get trapped in places that diminish them because they don't see alternatives." Elisa's smile was genuine. "Transforming your experience into opportunity for others. I like it." She extended her hand. "Welcome to the executive team, Chief Officer Sharma." As we shook hands, sealing the agreement, I felt the final pieces click into place. My journey from public humiliation to professional triumph hadn't been about revenge or even justice, it had been about reclamation. Reclaiming my value, my voice, and ultimately, my vision for what work could and should be. Marcus had fired me for quiet quitting, never realizing that what he perceived as disengagement was actually careful preparation for something better. He'd never understood that true commitment isn't measured in hours or performative stress, but in strategic vision and thoughtful execution. In the end, I hadn't just owned the trademark to his brand name. I'd owned my own worth, on my own terms. And that was a victory no one could ever take away. 1 year later, I stood at the podium of the grand ballroom at the Meridian Hotel, looking out at 500 faces turned expectantly toward me. The annual Women in Tech Leadership Summit had chosen me as their keynote speaker, a surreal honor that still didn't feel quite real, even as I adjusted the microphone and gathered my thoughts. "They call it quiet quitting," I began, my voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in my stomach. That dismissive little phrase designed to shame dedicated professionals who refused to sacrifice their well-being on the altar of corporate hustle culture. I was fired in front of my colleagues for supposedly quiet quitting. The reality? I was working smarter, not longer. Delivering results without the theatrical performance of exhaustion that had become my industry's status symbol. The audience was silent, attentive. In the front row, Elise gave me an encouraging nod. What my former CEO didn't know was that I'd done something he'd neglected. 3 years earlier, I'd registered the trademark to the company's name, properly, legally, using my own resources. He dismissed it as legal mumbo-jumbo that could wait. I recognized it as fundamental protection for a valuable asset. I paused, letting the implications sink in. That decision changed everything, not just for me, but for an entire company culture built on intimidation rather than innovation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Though my story had become something of a legend in certain tech circles, I rarely spoke about it publicly. This was the first time I'd addressed it from a stage. Today, I'm not here to tell you about revenge or vindication, though I won't pretend those elements weren't satisfying. A knowing chuckle moved through the audience. I'm here to talk about reclamation of your value, your boundaries, and your vision of what work should be. For the next 30 minutes, I shared my journey, not just the dramatic confrontations and legal maneuvers, but the deeper transformation. From someone who measured her worth through a toxic boss's approval to a leader who defined success on her own terms. The trademark was just a tool, I explained, nearing my conclusion. The real power came from recognizing my value independent of external validation. From understanding that true expertise doesn't need to perform exhaustion to prove its worth. As I finished my speech, the applause was immediate and sustained, startling in its intensity. People rose to their feet, a standing ovation that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Not because I craved the approval, but because I recognized in those faces the same determination I discovered in myself, to build something better, something more humane and sustainable. The reception afterward was a blur of handshakes, business cards, and earnest conversations. Women, and some men, approached me with their own stories of toxic cultures, arbitrary dismissals, and the struggle to maintain dignity in environments designed to diminish it. "Your speech was extraordinary," said a voice at my elbow as the crowd momentarily thinned. I turned to find a woman in her 60s, elegant in a tailored navy suit, her silver hair swept into a simple chignon. Though I suspect the unedited version would be even more compelling. I smiled, recognizing Catherine Winters, the legendary founder of Solstice Systems and a pioneer for women in technology leadership. The unedited version would require significantly stronger language than appropriate for a keynote. She laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "The best stories usually do." She handed me a business card, simple, heavyweight stock with just her name and contact information. "I'm assembling a working group focused on transforming tech culture from the top down. Board-level initiatives, executive accountability metrics, leadership development centered on sustainability rather than extraction. I'd like you to join us." I glanced at the card, then back at her. "That's a significant undertaking." "Transformation always is," she replied simply. "Think about it. Call me next week." With a gracious nod, she moved on, leaving me holding a card that represented yet another unexpected door opening. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Elise joined me at a quiet corner table, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "To the most talked about keynote of the conference," she said, offering me a glass. "You've inspired quite a few workplace revolutions today, I suspect." I accepted the champagne with a grateful smile. "That wasn't my intention. The best revolutions rarely begin as such," she observed. "They start with one person refusing to accept the unacceptable, setting boundaries that become precedents." She studied me over the rim of her glass. "You've come a long way from that restaurant table where we first met." The memory of that night, my public firing, Elise's unexpected intervention, felt simultaneously recent and distant, like looking at a photograph of yourself from years ago and recognizing both the person you were and the distance traveled since. "I saw Catherine Winters speaking with you," Elise continued. "Should I be concerned about losing my chief intellectual property officer to a competitor?" I shook my head. "She's forming a working group on transforming tech culture. Asked me to join." "You should accept," Elise said without hesitation. "Prism would benefit from being part of that conversation." Her immediate support, without a flicker of territorial concern, reminded me once again of the difference between leadership based on fear versus leadership based on confidence and vision. "I've been thinking about the mentorship program," I said, changing the subject slightly. "It's grown beyond our initial projections. In the year since my promotion, the program I'd established for legal professionals transitioning from toxic workplaces had expanded significantly. What began as informal guidance and networking support had evolved into structured workshops, placement assistance, and even psychological resources for rebuilding professional confidence after workplace trauma. The board is impressed," Elise confirmed. "Particularly with the retention rates of the professionals we've hired through the program. They're proposing an expanded budget for the coming fiscal year." "I'd like to take it further," I said, the idea that had been forming for weeks finally crystallizing. "Not just supporting individuals after they've experienced toxic environments, but helping companies transform their cultures before the damage occurs." Elise considered this, her expression thoughtful. "Preventative rather than remedial. Interesting. What would that look like in practice?" "Consulting services for companies committed to change." Assessment tools to identify problematic patterns before they become entrenched. Training for leadership in recognizing the economic costs of toxic culture, not just the human toll. The ideas flowed easily, pieces I'd been mentally assembling for months. The business case is clear: companies with humane, sustainable cultures outperform those built on fear and extraction. They innovate more effectively, retain talent longer, and demonstrate greater resilience during market fluctuations. You're describing a new division, Elise observed, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp with interest. I acknowledged. One that complements our existing services while expanding our impact. You'd want to lead it. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. With the right team and resources, we could position Prism as a leader. Not just in technology solutions, but in workplace transformation. Elise was silent for a moment, swirling the champagne in her glass. Then she smiled, a decisive, satisfied expression. Draft a proposal. I want it on my desk by the end of next week. Be ambitious with your vision, conservative with your projections. Just like that, no territorial defensiveness, no bureaucratic obstacles, just clear direction and support. I was reminded again why I'd chosen to build my post-Horizon career at Prism. One more thing, Elise added as we prepared to leave. Horizon Pulse announced their new CEO today. I thought you might be interested. I raised an eyebrow, curious. Despite myself. After Marcus's departure, Horizon had been led by an interim CEO while conducting an extensive search for new leadership. Rachel Chen, Elise said, watching my reaction. I nearly spilled my champagne. Rachel? My Rachel? From the legal department? Elise nodded, a hint of amusement in her eyes. The very same. Apparently, she led a remarkably successful overhaul of their Asia-Pacific division after leaving Horizon initially. The board was impressed enough to bring her back in the top position. Her first statement as CEO included some pointed remarks about building a culture based on sustainable excellence, rather than performative hustle. I couldn't help laughing, delight and disbelief mingling. Rachel, who had texted me warnings during my Horizon conflict, who had fled the toxic culture herself, was now returning to transform it from the highest position. The world moves in interesting circles, Elise observed. It does indeed. I agreed, making a mental note to send Rachel flowers and a congratulatory message. There was a certain poetic justice in her appointment that satisfied something deep in my spirit. Back in my hotel room that night, I found myself unable to sleep. My mind buzzing with possibilities. The keynote, Catherine Winters's invitation, the proposed new division at Prism, Rachel's appointment at Horizon, they felt like pieces of a larger pattern, a shift in the technological landscape that I was somehow both witnessing and helping to create. I opened my laptop and began drafting notes for the proposal Elise had requested, ideas flowing faster than I could capture them. This wasn't just about business strategy or market positioning, it was about fundamental transformation of how we defined success, valued contribution, and structured our working lives. 2 weeks later, my proposal for the new division, officially named Prism Catalyst, received unanimous approval from the board. 6 months after that, we launched our first comprehensive cultural transformation program with a mid-sized software company struggling with talent retention and innovation stagnation. The work was challenging, often messy, requiring both analytical precision and emotional intelligence. Changing entrenched patterns meant confronting uncomfortable truths, dismantling hierarchies built on intimidation, and establishing new metrics that valued sustainable contribution over performative extremes. Not every engagement was successful. Some company leaders claimed to want transformation but balked at the fundamental changes required. Others embraced the process intellectually but struggled to embody new behaviors consistently. Yet for those willing to do the genuine work, the results were remarkable: increased innovation, improved retention, and often, surprising financial performance. The quiet quitting accusation is almost always a leadership failure, not an employee failure, I explained to a skeptical CEO during a particularly tense consultation. When dedicated professionals start maintaining firmer boundaries, it's not because they've suddenly become lazy. It's because the environment has become extractive, beyond what's sustainable or reasonable. But how do I know they're giving their best? He countered, frustration evident in his voice. If they're leaving at 5, how can I be sure they're fully committed? You measure results, not hours, I replied calmly. You create conditions where people want to contribute their best because they're respected, supported, and appropriately challenged, not because they're afraid of public humiliation or termination. These conversations were rarely easy, but they were necessary. The pandemic had accelerated existing trends, forcing a widespread reckoning with workplace cultures built on physical presence as a proxy for contribution. Companies that adapted thoughtfully were thriving. Those that clung to outdated models of visible performative hustle were increasingly struggling to attract and retain top talent. 1 year into leading Prism Catalyst, I received an unexpected email from Marcus Harding. Seeing his name in my inbox sent a momentary jolt through my system, a vestigial stress response from years of navigating his volatile leadership. The message was brief, almost terse. Maya, I've been following the work you're doing with Prism Catalyst. Your recent article on sustainable leadership resonated more than I care to admit. I'm launching a new venture focused on developer tools for remote teams. Before I begin building the culture, I'd like to ensure I'm not replicating past mistakes. Would you consider a consultation? I understand if you decline given our history. Regards, Marcus. I read the message 3 times, searching for hidden agendas or passive-aggressive undertones. Finding none, I showed it to Elise during our weekly strategy meeting. Interesting, she said after reading it. Are you considering it? I'm not sure, I admitted. Part of me thinks it could be valuable, both for him and for our case studies on leadership transformation. Another part wonders if there's some angle I'm missing. What would make the difference in your decision? Elise asked, her question characteristically direct. I considered this. Genuine openness to change, I suppose. If he's truly seeking to build something different, that would be worthwhile work. If he's just looking for a veneer of progressive leadership to attract talent while maintaining the same fundamental approach, then no. There's only one way to find out, she pointed out. Meet with him, assess his sincerity, then decide. And so, on a crisp autumn morning, I found myself sitting across from Marcus Harding once again, not in an upscale restaurant chosen to intimidate, but in a neutral conference room at a downtown hotel. He looked different, the aggressive polish somewhat diminished, his expression more thoughtful than commanding. Thank you for meeting me, he began, the familiar authoritative tone noticeably absent. I imagine this wasn't an easy decision. Professional curiosity won out, I replied honestly. Your email suggested you might be approaching leadership differently in your new venture. He nodded, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. The past 2 years have been educational. After leaving Horizon, I did some consulting work. That exposed me to different leadership models. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with vulnerability. I also did some personal work. Therapy, specifically focused on management style and relationships. This admission, so contrary to the Marcus I'd known, who had once called therapy excuse-making for the motivationally challenged, caught me off guard. What prompted that? I asked, genuinely curious. He met my gaze directly, something like resignation in his eyes. After our last meeting, the one where we negotiated the trademark transfer, I couldn't stop thinking about something you said. About consequences being educational, not just punitive. It took me months to admit it. But you were right. My approach created vulnerabilities I never recognized until they materialized. I listened, neither accepting nor rejecting his explanation, waiting to see where it led. My new company is small, just 15 people so far. We're building tools to improve asynchronous collaboration for distributed teams. The market opportunity is significant, but the competition is fierce. We can't succeed with high turnover or burnout. I need sustainable commitment, not fear-driven performance. And you think I can help you achieve that? I asked, still uncertain of his true motivation. I think you understand both what works and what doesn't. You've experienced the worst of my leadership style and have built something demonstrably better. That perspective is valuable. His humility, however halting, seemed genuine. Not the performative contrition of someone seeking absolution, but the pragmatic recognition of someone who had learned costly lessons. What exactly are you asking for? I clarified. A full cultural architecture consultation, he replied without hesitation. Policies, practices, metrics, communication frameworks, the works. I want to build something fundamentally different from Horizon. Something sustainable. I studied him, looking for signs of the old Marcus, the manipulation, the thinly veiled intimidation, the reflexive dominance tactics. Instead, I saw something I'd never expected, uncertainty. The man who had once projected absolute confidence in his approach now appeared genuinely open to alternatives. I'll need complete transparency, I said finally. Financial projections, current team dynamics, your personal leadership patterns. Nothing held back. Agreed. And I'll be brutally honest in my assessment and recommendations. No softening criticism to protect egos. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I would expect nothing less. One final condition, I added. Any team members who wish to speak with me privately about their experiences must be allowed to do so without fear of repercussion. Their perspectives are essential to understanding the current state accurately. He hesitated only briefly before nodding. Understood and accepted. We spent the next hour discussing logistics, expectations, and timeline. As the meeting concluded, Marcus seemed to wrestle with something unsaid. Finally, as we gathered our respective materials, he spoke. I owe you an apology, Maya. The way I terminated your employment was unprofessional and unnecessarily cruel. It reflected my insecurities, not your performance. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air between us, unexpected and disarming. 2 years ago, I would have given almost anything to hear this acknowledgement. Now, it felt like the closing of a circle that had already completed itself through my own growth and reclamation. Thank you for saying that, I replied simply. It matters that you recognize it. Does it change anything? He asked, a hint of vulnerability breaking through his composed exterior. I considered the question. Between us personally? Perhaps. It demonstrates growth I wouldn't have thought possible. Professionally? No. My assessment of your new venture will be based on current patterns and practices, not past history. He nodded, accepting this boundary. Fair enough. As we parted ways, I felt a strange sense of completion, not because his apology had granted me anything I still needed, but because it confirmed how far I had traveled from the person who had once measured her worth through his approval. The consultation with Marcus's new company, aptly named Reframe Technologies, became one of Prism Catalyst's most interesting case studies. The transformation wasn't seamless, old habits occasionally resurfaced, requiring direct intervention and course correction. Yet the fundamental commitment to building differently appeared genuine, evidenced by policies that prioritized sustainable productivity over visible hustle, and metrics that measured impact rather than activity. 6 months into the engagement, at our final assessment meeting, Marcus asked a question that caught me off guard. Do you think people can truly change? Not just their behaviors, but their fundamental approach to leadership? I considered this carefully. I think people can evolve when they recognize that their current patterns aren't serving their actual goals. Your leadership at Horizon was designed to project dominance and extract maximum short-term performance. It succeeded at that while failing at building sustainable innovation and loyalty. When your goals shifted, your methods needed to shift as well. He nodded slowly. It's harder than I expected, rewiring these responses. Sometimes I catch myself slipping into old patterns, especially under pressure. That's normal, I assured him. Sustainable change isn't about perfection, it's about correction. Recognizing when you're reverting to outdated approaches and adjusting course before significant damage occurs. As our professional engagement concluded, Marcus extended an unexpected invitation, a speaking opportunity at a conference his company was sponsoring on the future of distributed work. We're gathering voices challenging traditional workplace paradigms, he explained. Your perspective on quiet quitting as a leadership failure rather than an employee deficiency would be valuable to the audience. I agreed, not because I sought Marcus's approval or validation, but because the platform aligned with my mission of transforming workplace culture. The fact that this opportunity came through a former adversary felt like evidence of a larger shift in the technological landscape, a growing recognition that extraction and intimidation were ultimately self-defeating strategies. The conference, held at a sustainably designed venue overlooking the bay, attracted leaders from across the technology sector. My panel, titled Beyond Hustle Culture, Sustainable Excellence in Distributed Teams, was scheduled for the second day. As I prepared backstage, a familiar voice caught my attention. Rachel Chen, now 6 months into her tenure as Horizon Pulse's CEO, was delivering the morning keynote on her company's cultural transformation. We had to acknowledge some uncomfortable truths, she was saying, her voice confident and clear. Our culture had become one that valued visibility over impact, hours over outcomes, theatrical stress over sustainable contribution. Changing that hasn't been easy, but the results speak for themselves. 32% increase in innovation metrics, 47% reduction in turnover, and perhaps most tellingly, a 19% improvement in customer satisfaction scores. I smiled, a sense of validation warming me from within. Rachel had taken the lessons from her own experience and applied them at scale, transforming the very company that had once epitomized toxic hustle culture. When my panel began, the room was packed, standing room only, with people lining the walls. The moderator introduced me last, mentioning both my role at Prism Catalyst and, with my prior approval, my history with workplace transformation, both personal and professional. The phrase, quiet quitting, emerged as a weapon. I began when it was my turn to speak. A term designed to shame employees who refused to sacrifice their well-being, their families, and their boundaries on the altar of performative hustle. But what if we reframed it entirely? What if what we call quiet quitting is actually healthy working? What if maintaining boundaries, focusing on impact rather than visibility, and refusing to participate in workplace theater isn't deficient, but advanced? The audience's response was immediate: nods, murmurs of agreement, a palpable sense of recognition. These were people who had lived this reality, who had either experienced or witnessed the damage done by cultures built on extraction and fear. When I was publicly fired for supposedly quiet quitting, it seemed like the end of my career, I continued. Instead, it became the beginning of something far more valuable, a journey toward building workplaces where excellence is sustainable, where contribution is measured by impact rather than performance, and where leaders earn loyalty through respect rather than fear. As I spoke, I caught glimpses of familiar faces in the audience: Rachel in the front row, Elise toward the back, and yes, Marcus himself, standing against the wall, listening with genuine attention. The future belongs to companies that understand a fundamental truth: humans are not resources to be extracted to exhaustion, but partners in creation whose well-being is directly linked to innovation and sustainability. The choice isn't between high performance and humane conditions, it's between short-term extraction and long-term excellence. When the panel concluded, the applause was sustained and genuine. People lined up to ask questions, share their own experiences, and express gratitude for putting words to what many had felt but struggled to articulate. As the crowd gradually dispersed, I found myself standing between Rachel and Marcus, my former colleague who had risen to transform the company that once discarded us both, and my former boss who had begun his own journey of professional evolution. Quite the full circle moment, Rachel observed with a knowing smile. Indeed it was. But not a circle that had returned me to where I began. Rather, an upward spiral that had transformed not just my circumstances but my fundamental understanding of professional worth and leadership. What had begun with a public firing and a secretly held trademark had evolved into something far more significant, a movement toward workplace cultures where value wasn't measured in hours or theatrical stress, but in sustainable contribution and mutual respect. To think, I said, looking between them, all of this began because someone decided quiet quitting was a firing offense. And because someone was smart enough to quietly own the trademark, Rachel added with a wink. Sometimes the greatest power isn't in loud declarations or dramatic confrontations, but in quiet preparation, strategic foresight, and the courage to stand firm when it matters most. The quiet quitter they had dismissed had transformed not just her own career, but the very definition of professional success. And that was a victory that couldn't be trademarked, couldn't be owned, but could be shared, amplified, and multiplied across an entire industry ready for change. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.